Hi everyone, welcome to a new Express Flute Tips video. Today I would love to share a personal approach I have to virtuosism, or let's say to mechanism, to the practice of the fingers basically. Okay, first of all, I have to be honest with you, and it's like there are no Express Flute tips for that. There are no Express tips. I cannot come now and say, hey, do this and this and this and the feeling is going to be amazingly better. I'm saying for the fingers, for the practice of the fingers. No, my perspective is a different one. It will come later. So, speaking concretely about the fingers, as I'm saying, I think unfortunately there is nothing we can do than practicing hard, being patient, being constant, and practicing all the wonderful mechanism books that we already have, and thanks that there were brilliant flute players that brought them, because they knew perfectly what was hard, and we have to do that. There was no other chance. And then once we have taken the time to do this, then comes the second part. That's what I'm going to speak about. I think that what I'm going to speak about is a little bit to go against a side effect that can happen when we have practiced a lot of mechanism about technique. What happens when we practice a lot of finger technique mechanism is that we want to give discipline to these little soldiers that we have here, that sometimes they don't want to obey us, and then then we are not in command, and then we are in trouble, because basically it can happen that one finger goes a little bit faster, the other one a little bit slower. Then when we have combinations or blocks of fingering, it can happen that this finger comes a little bit before, etc. For every person it can be different, depends on the abilities of the personal abilities of everyone, etc. There are things that are objectively quite hard for everyone also. But yeah, I think we agree on that. I think we should disagree on that we need to practice that, to do it slow, etc., etc., and to be metronomic, also to have the control of the metronome there. Precisely because we have to do it like that. We have to be metronomic, and so on. It can happen that this side effect, that it's like it sounds too vertical. Then the virtuosistic or virtuoso excerpts sound a little bit, vertical. And I think that we should go to search a little bit this horizontal feeling. I'll give you some examples on that. So basically, when we are practicing these Taffarel and Gobert exercises, when we do this, it can sound typically, when we have overdone that, or not overdone, we have done a lot of times, it can sound a little bit like that. Etc, etc, etc. That's not bad. Again, really, it's not that it's bad, that is wrong. No, in fact, it helps to also practice the sound of pa pa, or with a bright sound, and that we can have a timbre sound in the low resistor. Yeah, that's fine. But then we cannot apply that into music, or at least not into all the music, or at least not when the music has a gesture, when the music has a phrasing, or when the music it's, let's say, alive and not vertical. Music sometimes is vertical, but most of the time the phrasing is horizontal, it's not vertical all the time, all the beats, no? It can sound a little bit caricature. I think it's the same what happens with the piano, and SANCHEZ have written that in the Carnaval des Animaux, no? It's this caricature of the pianist playing scales, and a little bit like clang, 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 no? We all know that. It's like the same, the flute players, we are facing the same effect. So, basically I think that we should go to this horizontal approach, and that will sound a little bit more like that. And so on, okay? Then something I want to also be very clear about. When I'm speaking about being horizontal, always for me it's very important that we have a shape. And the shape means that it starts, it develops, and then it fades out. Or not, or it can be differently. It's not always like that, but it has a shape, or whatever we want to imagine, or whatever we want to do. But it's not like that. It's not... otherwise, it's what I say, like jokingly a bit, that it's like ironing the music or the notes, like if we were ironing the clothes, because then it sounds like that. And this is also what happens sometimes when we try to, no, let's give air into the note, and then it sounds like this massive thing, which I think sometimes it doesn't help. And maybe that's a little bit the misunderstanding with what I said. A little bit sometimes that's also the misunderstanding with the concept of line. That it's not, the concept of line for me, it's not against the concept of little gestures inside the line. We should have the mixture of the both things. That the music has a continuation, but there are little gestures inside. Otherwise, it's like that. What I have said, no. So I would really recommend you to go, and when you practice technique, these exercises and others, really go for this kind of feeling as if it was a long note. So. Okay, in order to avoid this kind of metronomical approach. It can sound, again, quite basic what I'm saying, but unfortunately I hear a lot of times, and it happened to myself a lot of times as well, that then we translate this vertical feeling into music, and then sometimes it happens that we play. When it's much more easy, even technically and for the sound, if we try to imitate a legato sound, which is way much relaxed, that has this gesture, and which is more nice, more. And the same kind of feeling can be, let's say, applied to many different excerpts that can be, let's say, virtuosistic. Even more tricky ones than this one. That the difficulty then is, of this one for me, is to have this articulation which is like, let's say, inside the sound and etc. But for instance, when you have to play this, if we do like that, like, okay, then teacher can say, let's do it slow. Yeah, and then we do slow, we practice slow, like. And it's like, yeah, maybe the fingers are not the problem. Maybe the problem, and that's where I think that we always learn more from mistakes than from things that we can do easily. Because things that we can do easily is because we have internalized, so that's something that we already have. But from the mistakes is when we learn. So what's the mistake we can do this? We can do here. Of course, when I'm speaking, when the fingers are under control. But if I'm doing this, I really think that the fingers are not the problem. I think that the problem is having a gesture, but the difficulty is that we have to make a register change. Because if we do nothing, then it sounds. That's the difficult thing for me here. So I have to practice it quite exaggerated and slow. But with the feeling that it's a gesture, so it's not or this kind of feelings that I think that then later, if I have to play it fast, they are going to annoy me and they are going to, disturb me. So I would simply go for a practice session of. And eventually it comes more naturally. And also what I'm training is the feeling of playing it naturally. That's something quite important for me, because when I have to play that fast, there is no time to think so much. And I think that it's quite easier if we have the feeling more internalized, and we just trust ourselves, we just trust our work, and we just play with that feeling, okay? Little bit the same is with this famous excerpt that we all struggle a lot, because it is unfortunately not easy, okay? When we have to play this. Etc. Okay, for me, it should be very relaxed, and we should always practice it legato, because the difficult thing is not only the fingers but the different changes on the register, and that it sounds with this continuity. Okay, so we can always try to think first in the sound once we know the concept by heart. Okay, we can simply think in the okay, and then we try to, with the same feeling, and then we have to be very analytic and cool down and say, okay, difficult is for me personally it's difficult because it's and then I'm training the feeling, okay? I have to be also very honest with all of you. Perfection sometimes is not possible. We have to admit we are humans and we are going to make some mistakes. It's also, let's say, normal. But for me, there is no other approach for difficult except like this one than doing that and being very analytical of what are the mistakes and learning from them in order to try to avoid them, and then practice the feeling. This more horizontal feeling that helps me to play it in a more natural way, as if it was a breathing. I hope that it was helpful for you. I know that this topic sometimes it's very stressing for all of us because we want to play and then we repeat again and repeat. It happens to all of us. But I think that this approach, at least it helps me a lot, and it helps me to go to be constructive and not to be all the time like, no, wait, nothing happened, no, again. It will happen. We have to admit that someday it will happen, but at least having this approach, yes, can be constructive. So I hope that it was helpful for you, and see you in the next video. Thanks a lot for being there, and ciao.